Welcome to Second Saturday Conversation. Second Saturdays are an opportunity for us to reflect on Christianity in and for the 21st century. And our overarching topic for this year, or sort of the underlying subtext for this year, is evolution of the word. All things change. And as Christians, when we think of the word, if we capitalize it, we might think of Bible or God or Jesus. But word can also mean how we use language, how we understand language systems and language games, and how we understand expressive and poetic language. So the evolution of the word, what we are acknowledging is that depending upon the context in which our experiences arise, the way we understand them, the way we interpret them may change. And all things change. Everything is movable and relocatable, okay? So that in which we live and move and have our being is always in movement. Things are always changing and evolving. And this is a given. I think that so often we think in terms of reality as a fixed thing that we need to capture or comprehend or whatever. But it's we live in a very dynamic world. Reality is dynamic and ever changing. So what happens to something like Christianity that arose in a very different context? What happens when the context that Christianity finds itself in, and here we are in the 21st century, what happens when the context is so different? I think what is called for, and when the matrix of things, when the established rules, when the assumptions, when the presuppositions are questioned, what happens when Christianity finds itself in a context that is very different than the world that it began, where it originated? And I would suggest, I mean, this is an obvious thing to say, but that Christianity today is in the process of, this is kind of a fancy word coming up, recontextualization. The context in which Christianity arose and the context in which it finds itself now is very, very different. And I think that what is important and necessary is that Christianity open itself up to different kind of questioning and wonderment and curiosity, and acknowledges the importance of recontextualization if Christianity is going to continue to speak to our time. So, and today what I want to do is throw out some of my thoughts, some things that are sort of moving in my thinking about how to think about Christianity in the 21st century. And I'm really eager to hear from you what your sense is of how Christianity needs to open itself up to other possibilities if it is going to have an impact and a relevance to speaking to what it means to live in the world today. So I'm really eager to hear from you. What are your thoughts about Christianity in and for the 21st century and this whole process of recontextualization? Okay, so before I go on with that, Carol, I'd love to have you say a little bit about the chat and then a little bit about the plenary time, which will come up fairly soon. So do you want to help orient us a little bit about that?
Yes, I would like to do that. Good morning. Thank you to all of you who are showing up and sharing this piece of your Saturday morning with us. Like Marianne, it's such a gift to hear your thoughts and learn from each other. Looking forward to this morning. There will be a plenary after Marianne's remarks this morning. And again, it's time for you to share your thoughts and your reflections on what Marianne shares. I will be calling from the top of the screen where I see people who have raised their hand. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, an option is under reactions. And if you click on that, one of the first options is a raised hand that will show up on the top of my screen. My screen doesn't necessarily match everybody else's, so please don't think that I'm ignoring anybody by who I call on. Also would like to encourage you to really think about what you would like to say to Marianne. We have 250 people on this morning, and we'd like to hear from as many people as possible, although we also acknowledge right up front that that's impossible to hear from everyone. But if you could be very succinct in forming what your response or your question is for Marianne, we would be able to hear, so we could be able to hear as many people as possible. If you could keep your comments to 2 minutes, that would be very helpful. And then during the coffee hour, that's a more informal time, which will follow about 15 minutes after we're finished. And an invitation to all of you to stay and greet Marianne, or if you still have some burning issue that needs to be spoken, it's a time to do that as well. We'll review these instructions when we get closer to that time, but welcome. Notice what you notice this morning, pay attention to what you pay attention to, and know that we are supporting you in whatever way we can. If you need any help, I think, Marianne, have them contact our wonderful
Jake Tieford, whom I couldn't do this without Jake.
And if you
Right.
need help, Jake will certainly be able to help you with whatever you need. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you. Today, I want to open up and prompt some thoughts about Christianity in and for the 21st century. And this is all in pencil on my part. These are things that I'm wondering about, and as Carol said as well, I'm eager to hear from you and kind of build on or counter whatever the kinds of things that I'm coming up with. Christianity for the 21st century. I think one of the things that is really important that we do is to reimagine, reconsider, perhaps even reinvent our images of God. One of the quotes that I put forth in the very beginning here is from Marcus, who talks about how important images of God are and how much they shape what we think the religious life is about, what we think the Christian life is about, what we think reality is about. So how we image and understand God is really important. And I think this is a conversation that communities need to have. As you know, any of you who've been part of Second Saturday Conversation, we really feel that it's important to move away from the image of God as a supernatural being out there, a sovereign supernatural being who is in charge of everything and is somehow the mover of everything and is even sovereign. I don't think that that's a helpful understanding that addresses the vagaries of our experience of life. So I think it's important that we re-image what we think God is and how we imagine him. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I think Jack Caputo, had a phrase that really caught me that I'm still thinking about. He talked about, for instance, grace, that we don't need God for grace, but grace is, in a sense, for God. And let me unpack that just a little bit. If we think that we need God for grace, that makes God the dispenser of grace. But if we experience grace as something in our lives, is not that experience something that moves us to say, oh, that is expressive of what I'm calling God? So the suggestion here is that rather than thinking about God as a thing or a person, that it's more of a quality of life. It is more, rather than, for instance, God giving us courage, can we think about it in terms of the courage that we have to persevere and live our life? Is that experience of courage something that where we will say, oh, I thank God? Okay. So that God has more to do with our experience of something that is happening in our lives that is worthy of the name of God. Okay. So it's a shift in terms of, rather than God being a dispenser, like a Pez dispenser of something good, God is a response, that the language of God has more to do with a response to how we experience some of the wonder and even perplexity of our life. Okay. Now, I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about, because I think that that is a different way than we often think about God. But I love the invitation to think about God as the quality of things, and certainly not as a being. Okay. So images of God, I think Christianity in the 21st century really needs to grapple with how we understand God, our images of God, how we language that, and how God is part of human experience that evokes a response in us, that response to that experience is why the language of God even comes forth. Okay. God is that in which we live and move and have our being. And when something emerges that it's like, something deep, experiential in our lives, we have I think that's when we tend to say, oh my God. Okay. So I just want to throw that out there. I'm really curious to know how you hear that. I think another thing that Christianity needs to grapple with in the 21st century is the problem of the difficulty of life. In my invitation to this second Saturday conversation, I referred to Kierkegaard, who talks about that he thinks that we have tended to skirt difficulty or come up with quick, fast answers. Christianity tends to tidy things up or button things up really quickly about what this or that means, and that we are avoiding the difficulty and the risk that is part of life. By the way, this is not an original idea with Kierkegaard. It's an observation, but I'm really struck with his comment that Christianity, modern Christianity, has tended to avoid the difficulty that is life. The fact that we want certitude. We are hoping everything's programmable. We want security. We want assurances. Of course we do. That's part of our human need, is for that kind of stability. And also, life is not always those things. Things are not always predictable. Things come into life that seem maybe random or ambiguous or difficult. And how do we accept that? We tend to say the difficulties of life are a penalty. I think that's not a healthy or good way to think about it. But the fact that life is difficult and that there is risk in life, I think that Christianity, if it is going to speak at all to our situation in the 21st century, has to come to terms with that in a different way than saying, well, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. So I think we need to rethink that. Talk about difficulty in a different way. Talk about life as involving risk. It's just part of our experience. Life involves risk. And life, though, is also a gift. It's also a gift. I mean, we didn't ask to come into this world, but we find ourselves here in this sort of remarkable setting of wonder and beauty and difficulty and the unknown. And so I think that part of our challenge is to re-examine the reality of risk and reaffirm the wonder that really is the gift of life, the gift of life. And in a sense, accept the gift of life without conditions, affirming its sort of irresistible worth. And I think that Christianity, the way that conventional or the way that Christianity has tended to try to explain things, there's a lot of requirement, and if you do this, then all will go well, or if you do this, this, if you believe this, this is guaranteed. Well, that just isn't so. I mean, for those for whom some of that thinking has been working on, that's all great. But but life in the big picture does not work that way. And I think Christianity needs to be more honest about that. And so what does it have to offer? What does it have to offer? We as human beings, we live in that tension of the goodness and beauty and wonder. And we live in the tension of the unknown, which is not a bad thing, by the way, but we tend to be more fearful of the unknown. Culture and religion has a tendency to make us fearful of the unknown, but the unknown is really where the potential for promise is, in my opinion. But we live in the tension of, beauty and affirmation and wonder and mortality and the fact that we're not in control and the fact that we sometimes we don't know what it is that's going on. Okay, but we live in that tension, and we're built for it. I think that's part of the human capacity. We're capable of remarkable joy and love and freedom, and we also experience tremendous dislocation and perplexity and suffering and difficulty. So that's life. And we tend to moralize the difficulties, but I'm not sure that's very helpful. So we live in the tension of life as wonder and life as risk, life as a gift and life as risk. And I think we are built to handle that, to live through that. I think we have tremendous capacity for both. And so I'm curious about that tension that we live in and how we address that, how we talk about that tension, rather than, I think a tendency we have is to moralize it and to say that, that bad things happen. It's the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, then depending upon what we think of God, right? The problem of theodicy. Well, how can God let this happen if God is all sovereign? Well, theodicy is not, in my opinion, is not God's problem. We put that all on God as the cause of all of that. I don't think that's the case. But in the midst of difficulty, something arises, something happens, we get through it, or we don't. But I think that's where God is at play. Something else that I really do affirm that there is that deep in the structure of ourselves and deep in the structure of reality is, for lack of a better word, I'll use the word goodness, but I think deep in the structure of reality is something that seeks newness, seeks innovation, seeks expression, seeks possibility. That deep in the structure of ourselves and of all of reality is something that seeks more possibilities. And one potentially bit of evidence for that has to do with the neutrino, the superhero of the subatomical particle world. The neutrino, and there are some of you out there who know a lot more about this than I do, but my understanding is that when the Big Bang happened, that there are these little subatomic particles, and there's matter and antimatter. It's just everything has matter and antimatter. This is kind of like gift and risk, okay? So you've got matter and antimatter. But neutrinos are everywhere. We've got billions of them inside of ourselves. But what I learned was that neutrinos have a preference for matter. And that if that were not so, the universe after the Big Bang would have destroyed itself a long time ago. But that neutrinos have a preference for matter. Now, that is probably matter and antimatter are technical terms, and I really don't know the depths of those technical terms, but I love the idea, the language of it, that neutrinos prefer matter to antimatter. Prefers, what really matters to something else. That deep in the structure of things, there is something that, and I'm going to use this phrase again, that prefers matter over antimatter. So that is part of my own sense of how deep in our experience of reality, there is a hopefulness that has to do with possibilities and things yet to come that we maybe don't know of at this point, but that will speak to more life, more variation, more innovation, more possibilities. And even those things that we think now are impossible might become possible. So I think that Christianity, I think Christianity knows this, but we have tended to, as I said earlier, kind of button up what certain things mean in Christianity. We've interpreted things in a certain kind of tight framework, a kind of closed system that I think is closing in on itself and is no longer really speaking to the realities of our experience of life. Borrowing from the tradition, one reason that I think Christianity is keen to what we don't know, and that what we don't know that is to come can, a phrase we've been using here in Second Saturday, shatter the horizon of our expectations. Okay, and I think about how we start for Christianity, how Christianity starts its liturgical year with Advent, and Advent means to come. So what is to come? Truth be told, we don't know. Advent has a way of saying, let me tell you what's to come. It's Jesus, and then it's a second coming, and this is what's to come. But on a deeper level, I think that all the great religious traditions know that whatever is to come is beyond our knowing, and that it takes us beyond the limits of our presuppositions, and that the things that just means that the to come is part of it's the future. There is a future. Now, whether it's going to be a better future or not better future, there are a lot of factors that go into that. I think a lot of that has to do with us. But the to come. Epiphany means that which has been hidden beneath the surface is manifest. Okay, so something is yet to come. And I suggest that we don't know what that is. That whatever is what is stirring underneath us? I mean, it's neutrinos, but what is stirring underneath? What is to come? How is this going to affect the future? Again, I think that we story the idea of epiphanies by making it pretty concrete and pretty specific. But I think that Christianity is aware that the to come is beyond our knowing. And that is actually a good thing. That brings us into, that opens up possibilities, and it opens up questions. And even though we are a species that seems to want answers, that sense of openness to possibility, I think, is something that we need to emphasize more. And Christianity is not about a checklist of things to believe, but it's about an openness to experience and an openness to life experience with a kind of trust that even though there are no guarantees, that the sense of the possible will be generative. Okay. So I think at the heart of Christianity, the invitation is a kind of existential trust in the nature of our being and in the nature of reality. So that we can look upon what is to come, not fearfully, which is how we tend to look at the unknown, but love it. I love what is to come, even though I know it's a risk. But risk also invites us to experience more fullness of life. And I think we tend to be risk averse because we're afraid of it. We're afraid because there are no guarantees, because security is a relative thing. So I think we're more fearful of life than we are willing to, knowing it's a gift, but risking living it. And I think if Christianity has anything to offer, it is to say we can trust, we must trust. And I think that when we trust and when we experience the fruit of that trust, I think that's when we have a tendency to say, thanks be to God. Okay. I also think that we human beings, I think that this trust, this sense of possibilities, this sense of the to come, I think it's all kind of related to the fact that we dream, that we hope, wish day come, not choose not to be, as Gerard Manley Hopkins says, but that we dream. And I think Jesus, for instance, was all about the dream. Jesus was all about the kingdom of God, how it can be, what is possible, which seems also impossible to us: justice, compassion, profound acceptance of humanity, that we're here for one another, that to love one another, to even love our enemies. I mean, that just sounds impossible. But Jesus had this dream that there is what he called the kingdom of God, what the world would look like if God were what was happening. Not that God is going to make it happen, but what the world would look like if we experienced God in the way that I'm suggesting here. And I think that deep, it's almost that reality evokes in us dreaming, longing for things to be different. It's like, it doesn't have to be this way. It can be something else. And I think Jesus was all about that, and saying to us, never give up the dream that things can be different, that there's more possibility. And what do we value? What really matters? Christianity also raises up the question of what is it to be human? I think that we tend to button up that too quickly too by saying, well, you know, Jesus, divine. I mean, we forget aspects of our own humanity in the way that we talk about Jesus, as though Jesus is some kind of, that he's really not quite like us. Well, I'm counting on the fact that he is a lot like us. I think that's our hope. So I think too that, you know, you remember from Cinderella, that song, a dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. What I love about that is that a dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep, when you don't know, but that something in us longs for something more, something better, something that has greater possibilities in it. And I think that's the greatness of the human spirit. And I think related to that one of the things that, if Christianity is going to be Christianity, and even use some of the language of Christianity in the future, that one of the affirmations of Christianity, and that we as human beings must affirm, is that the future will be better. The future will be better. Because in part of some of the things I've sort of talked about the to come, the neutrinos, the sense of possibilities, the fact that we do not live in a closed system. We have no idea, really, that in which we live and move and have our being. We don't know about most of it, but we're part of it. And what I think is important, and what I don't hear a lot today, is that the future will be better. And the way we look at the future, the data is not great, right? In terms of what we're doing to our planet, how we treat one another as human beings, war, violence, famine, disease, all kinds of things. It's now how many seconds before midnight on the clock of the existence of the planet. The future looks difficult, very difficult. And it's, for most of us, we are thinking, well, we'll be out of here before it gets really, really bad. What I think is important for us to think about is for us to so love the gift of life, to so recognize it as that, and accept its risks and difficulties, but to so cherish the worthiness of existence and the wonder of it, and the fact that it is at all, that we are at all, that we have such a deep recognition of that, that we want others to have the experience of this life, risks and all, and that we want the future to be better, even though it won't be our future. That we want a better future for a future that will not be ours, but a future for those who are yet to come. I think an unfortunate move in the old paradigm, what Marcus would call it, the old paradigm of Christianity, is the heaven and hell paradigm, where that we, after that this life here is actually just the preparatory for going to heaven, that heaven is the real destination, and that we're just here in the meantime, but that our life is really about going to heaven. I just think that's a terrible idea. And we don't know what's after this life, but that, I think, is not regarding the gift that is life deeply enough and honestly enough. And it's dismissing it as though this is sort of the difficulties of life are in our way, but in the by and by, we'll be fine. That is ignoring the difficulties of life in a way that is self-defeating. It prevents a future. It prevents a future. And if we think the future is under threat, that's despair. So how to stir in us a desire that the future will be better, even if it's not ours. And what does it take for that? Because for many people, life is not in itself a gift. It's very difficult. There's suffering, there's illness, but so how do we make this world, with all of its risk and uncertainty, how do we work on systemic change and our own personal transformation and all of that, so that this world can be experienced by everybody as the gift that it really is, come what may? I mean, I think we have a capacity in us to have that be what life is about. I think that's built in us. But somehow I think we lose track of that, and we get too fearful, and we don't have enough confidence in what we don't know, which is the to come, which holds possibilities that we have yet to dream of, but that might be the very stuff of our dreams. So I think that the heart of Christianity, I think we need to return to Christianity, asking more questions, and return to it without doctrine. To return to what was going on in Jesus, what did people sense and experience in Jesus? How is Jesus helping us to understand the nature of God and reality and possibility? And what about the dream? We should never give up on that. But to return to Christianity, but without doctrine, that I think has closed Christianity to possibilities that that at its heart, it actually affirms. I'm my articulation of all this is not very keen, and I won't apologize for that, although I think I just did. But these are some things I'm fussing with, wondering about, and so I would, we've got plenty of time for you to either respond to some of the things I'm saying, or in my restlessness and my curiosity and my hope, which is not a thing, but it's a galvanizing presence. what are your thoughts about Christianity in and for the 21st century? I think Christianity is kind of at the end of its tether, and it needs to break out. I think that some of these thoughts that I'm talking about, changing the image of, or reimagining the image of God, and thinking again about what is it to be human, and about facing the reality of difficulty, and life as gift and life as risk, and all of this stuff is, I think these are windows to open up in the walls that Christianity has built around itself. So I think these are potential windows through which we could look and see a different horizon in front of us, and let the two come and maybe shatter the horizons of our expectations, and be open to what Paul himself calls new creation or new life or whatever. Okay. But I don't think that has to do with heaven. I think that has to do with our life here and our experience with one another, and the reality of mortality, and which I just think underscores the gift of life, the reality that we are mortal, but that this gift of life is so worth its salt that we want to make sure that future generations can experience this gift of life with all of its difficulties, and that what we are here to do is to help to make the future better, to help to make the future better. And in doing so, I think that we make the presence of God real. If God is more a experience, it's what's happening in what we're doing, then we are part of the history of God, and how we live and act now and for the future is evidence of God. And as Jack Caputo, I think, would say, is God insists that the future can be better, but we're the ones that will provide the evidence. So I'm just fussing around. So this is all, as I said, this is all in pencil. I'm not a good linear thinker, but these are things that are sort of popping up in my mind as I'm thinking about Christianity in and for the 21st century. I'd love some help. I'd love your thoughts about how you see it, what you think is needed. This is my comments today are certainly not comprehensive, but it just tells you kind of what I'm fussing with. Okay. Carol, do you want to, in preparation for plenary time, Carol, do you want to return to a little bit about plenary, and where to find the button for putting your hand up and all of that again? That would be helpful.
Great. We have some time now for you to share your thoughts and maybe some more questions. The chat, as always, is just lit up with comments and interesting thoughts. And it will, am I right, Marianne, that will be included in the recording of today's session?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Carol. When we post this, and we'll post this session on the website, that the chat is also posted, so people can see and refer to that and know what kind of subtext or other conversations were going on at the same time.
I would encourage you to look at that. It always is a very rich exchange going on.
It'll be really helpful for me because I don't look at the chat while we're doing this. Yeah. So as I said, I need some help out here.
And again, just the process is, Marianne's going to read some listening guidelines for us that really help us to frame this next little bit of time that we have. But it's a time to just ask any questions, reflect, especially I think Marianne would like to hear your reflections on the thoughts that she's shared with us this morning.
Yeah. Again, what they think, regardless even of what I think, it's like, but what do you think? What has prompted some thoughts of yours? That's I'm interested in that too.
Great. So again, I'm going to choose from the line of people who's raised hands which there's already, I think, 6 people who have their hands raised. And not particularly in the same order that you might see them. And I just encourage you to take a few minutes to really reform your thoughts really concisely, so that as many people as possible can share what they'd like to share this morning. Marianne, you invite us sometimes into a little bit of silence to just let what you've said rest a little bit and for people to just form their ideas. Let's do that just for a minute. Join us for a minute of silence and just be aware of what your thoughts are and what your voice needs to share with us this morning. Perfect. Amen.
So let me read the listening guidelines. They describe kind of our hospitality as we speak and listen to one another. So, and those of you who are part of Second Saturday, you're familiar with these. Take time to become settled in God's presence. And Carol, thank you for giving us, inviting us into some silent time. Listen to others with your entire self, senses, feelings, intuition, imagination, and rational faculties. Don't interrupt. Pause between speakers to absorb what has been said. Don't formulate what you want to say while someone else is speaking. We tend to do that all the time. Speak for yourself only, expressing your own thoughts and feelings, referring to your own experiences, and avoid being hypothetical. It's not easy. And steer away from broad generalizations. Okay. Don't challenge what others say. Listen to the group as a whole, to those who have not spoken aloud, as well as to those who have. And generally leave space for anyone who may want to speak a first time before speaking a second time yourself. And note to self, hold your desires and opinions, even your convictions, lightly. Okay. So I'd love to just hear some reactions and responses and your thoughts as we consider what about Christianity in and for the 21st century, and does Christianity for the 21st century have anything to offer, and does it need to re-examine itself in order to do that?
So Stephen Braun, would you unmute yourself and share with us?
I'd like to reflect off a couple of your ideas in your talk this morning, which I really enjoyed. The first one was about the word or words. That made me think about how words to me are inherently dualistic, and they're always an abstraction from our experience, that they are attempting to engender some understanding among each other for that experience, and that's where words come from, but they're always limited. And I have my own mantra I always use is, words are stones, thoughts are flowers. The second thing I wanted to reflect on that you already said was about the idea of, Christianity should not be easy. It is hard, Kierkegaard said. That made me think of The Courage to Be by Tillich, and also the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer calling for religionless Christianity. In both cases, they sort of echoed, as you said, Kierkegaard wasn't the only one. The last thought I had, this is the one I really want you to react to, please. Much of what you said about the future made me think about the prophetic imagination, which is, I believe, Walter Brueggemann's term. I would submit it is think deeply and act compassionately. And do that, the prophecy is not for the future, but it's for the present, which is right on with what you were talking about. So those are my comments, and I love your reaction to the Brueggemann idea. Thanks.
Wow, wow. I really appreciate everything you said, by the way. You know, the courage to be, you know, Bonhoeffer talked about cheap grace, which I think is sort of like Kierkegaard saying bourgeois Christianity, you know. The prophetic imagination, Stephen, I really like your bringing attention to that. Walter Brueggemann, by the way, I think is fabulous and is a wonderful, wonderful insight into the biblical tradition. So repeat what you said about think deeply and act compassionately. Is that, did I get that right?
You're still muted.
Can you unmute, Steve?
Yes, you
Okay.
nailed it. That was my attempt to paraphrase the concept of prophetic imagination, which is an entire book, into a phrase of think deeply and act compassionately. So it's tying into your idea about what is the future and how is the future not out there, but it's here and now.
Right. And I'll just, I mean, yeah, you put that so beautifully. I think that absolutely that the future will be in large part affected by what we do in the present. So, you know, for instance, I mean, I think about systemic change and how difficult that is and how long it takes to. But if we don't start making some systemic changes or change the way we think, I love this think deeply, or as others have said, dare to think. Dare to think differently, okay? That if we don't start practicing that now, the future will be closed. But if we start reimagining now and reconstructing or whatever, then that starts opening up the future for other possibilities. And I think that compassion and being compassionate with one another and loving one another, and I mean, loving this life. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm not sure that's a given. I think there are folks for whom they fall just short of saying, I love this life. But to love this life and see it as the gift that it is, and to be compassionate with one another, I think that also, and I love what you said about language, that there's always a limit in language, that there's something about our actions or how we are with one another or what's happening with one another that moves us beyond the limit. If that doesn't sound too abstract, you know, but that all of that is sort of participating in something that is now, but that I also think somehow ushers the way for the to come, even though it doesn't always predict it. But it makes possible the to come. Is that all too abstract? I don't know. But anyway, I love what you said. And by the way, as you know, one of Brueggemann's books after the prophetic imagination is Here Comes the Poet. So we can just throw that into the hopper as well. Here Comes the Poet.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Stephen. Nice to have you here.
Sharon Sanderson, can you unmute yourself and share with us?
Thank you. You talked a little bit about systemic change. And I agree with you totally. My problem is I am so overwhelmed by what needs to be changed, and I have no idea what to do. Can you offer some help with that?
Oh, I wish I could. What I agree with you about being overwhelmed. So, because I don't feel competent to know how to go about systemic change, but what I don't want to give up on is, in a sense, the dream that it can happen. Now that might sound like a too soft and too ineffective a response. But what I in not knowing and in feeling overwhelmed, my hope is that there are folks who are on the ground who know a lot more about sociological stuff and what it takes for systemic change and education, the importance of education to get us to think differently and to dare to act differently and all of that. I don't want to give up, even though I'm overwhelmed. I don't want to give up that it's possible. As you know, there was a poem that I started this year with, I think, it was Hopkins, I'll not carry in comfort, I'll not carry in comfort is despair. I'll not feast on thee. Not cast slack they may be, these last strands of man in me, or cry, I can no more. I can something, hope, wish day come, not choose not to be. So even though I get so overwhelmed, I'll not let despair overcome me. And I think that those of us who maybe it's like, I don't know exactly what to do, but don't give up on the possibility of systemic change and encourage those to, it's like, help us out. Who can help us? Who can do this? But not to give up on it.
Thank you.
Now, and that may be the weakness of God. I don't know exactly what to do. I'm not in charge of this, but I'll not carry in comfort, not despair, not feast on thee.
When you said you're not in control, are you implying that God is in control?
No,
Okay.
I am not. No. I think that's a bad categories.
Yeah.
Suggest that God is in control and we just need to wait it out until God makes it happen. No, I think that God is the galvanizing presence that will make us make differences.
Thank you.
That's kind of where I'm moving in my thinking. That God is to borrow from Jack, God is the insistence. The insistence that things can be another way. And I think Jesus said the same. So anyway, I wish I had an answer for you, Sharon. But just don't give up, even though we're overwhelmed and we may feel despair. That shuts off the future. And as human beings, we mustn't do that. Because I don't think that's who we are.
Thank you, Sharon, for asking the question that probably all of us have. And although there's no answer, I think it's important to just keep asking that question. What can we do? Jim, hi. You can unmute yourself.
Hello,
Yes,
Jim.
good morning. Good morning to everyone. This is an interesting conversation because we're talking about the ultimate reality of our existence. And for thousands of years in the past, that ultimate reality was a being whose name was referred to as God.
Mhm.
And I think we've got to move away from that, as you've said. God is not a being sitting on a throne up in the sky somewhere.
Mhm.
God didn't make the earthquake happen in Turkey a week ago.
Right.
God gives us the potential to move forward in this life. That's what God does, except I don't call it God anymore.
Okay.
Years ago, I started to think I've got to come up with a different word.
Mm.
And what I came up with is the life force energy of the universe. I see that every time I see a blooming flower.
Yeah.
or a tree growing.
Yeah.
Or one of my nieces or nephews that grow from a little baby all the way up to a teenager and then into somebody I can really communicate with. I see that as I see it as a positive
Right.
force, because just look at the history of mankind. Kitty Hawk was the first time man flew in an airplane in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Man walked on the moon in 1969. There are 66 years between those two events. That's how fast we are moving in this world.
Right.
And the internet and artificial intelligence is moving us faster and faster.
Right.
So we need to adopt a different philosophy, a different thinking.
Right.
And the world is getting better. I'm 82 years old and I've lived through a lot of it.
Right.
And the world is getting better. Even though we have misfits like Putin who attacked a country that just out of the blue.
Right.
And so I think the life force energy of the universe is the perfect term, better than even the ground of being or ultimate reality.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's my gift for today.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. A basket full of gifts. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Becca, can you unmute yourself and share with us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Becca, and it's my first time here.
Oh,
So I'm
goodness.
feeling very excited to have found a group of people who seems to think in very similar ways that I do. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much.
Great.
I wanted to respond to something you said very early on about the idea of grace and the idea that God is not the dispenser of grace, but that grace is an experience of God.
Right.
That really resonated with something I've been thinking about recently, and an experience that I had about a year ago, which is that I really wronged somebody. Like, I really made a big mistake in my life, and it led me to feel extremely guilty for months, really, of just horrible guilt and regret over how I'd acted.
Mm.
And when I was a kid, I was taught that the way to resolve something like that is to pray and to ask God for forgiveness and to receive grace, and that's like the ticket into the afterlife.
Right.
But that wasn't adequate for me. Like, it wasn't working. I still felt horrible about it and couldn't move past it. And it wasn't until I went to the person who I had harmed and apologized and asked and like basically submitted myself to punishment, like told this person that they could like that I would accept the consequences of my actions. And when I did that, this person responded with like what in my view was like really a superhuman act of grace. Like, he not only like forgave me and didn't choose to like impose any consequences on me, but really showed me like extremely deep love and like just human like respect and dignity. And that was to me like one of the most Christ-like experiences I've ever had in my life. But it couldn't have happened with me just sitting in my room and praying. Like, it had to be an interaction with another person. And that's what and that goes to something I think about a lot, which is what Jesus said about wherever two or more are gathered in my name is where I am, which to me means like wherever two or more people are gathered in the spirit of love and forgiveness and radical acceptance that Jesus represents is where God exists. And but it has to be two. It has to be two or more. It can't just be one person. Like, it's explicitly two or more people.
Right.
And anyway, I just really resonated with that idea a lot. And yeah.
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing that. And what your own experience of this is that you became vulnerable, and it was a risk because you actually didn't know how this person might respond to you. But what I love is that this person, then you experienced though the forgiveness of grace. Okay. But it was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
but it took you, you made yourself vulnerable. It was a risk. And I love what you said, it takes two, right? You know, Marcus talks about, you know, is God out there somewhere, yeah, or is it a relationship? I think you've sort of underscored that whatever we're talking about with God, that relational experience exposed God.
Mhm.
Does that, you know?
Yes, definitely.
You know, because I think sometimes when Marcus uses the language of relationship with God, we'll still think about it anthropomorphically. But I don't think Marcus is quite saying that either. I think there's something about this relational thing and what you went through that exposed what we might say is God.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's a different way of understanding what it is to experience God and to even seek God. But anyway, I mean, thank you, Becca, for sharing that experience of yours, because I think it's so, it just sheds light on so much for us. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm so glad you did that, by the way. You carried that for a
Thank
long time. Glad you did that. Yeah.
Thank you, Becca. Did I hear you say this is your first time?
Yes, it is. It's my first time.
Well, welcome. We hope you join us again. Your voice really adds a lot. Thanks.
Thank
There's
you
a
very
lot of kindred spirits here, I think, for you, Becca.
I can tell. Yeah,
There's
it's
a lot of
amazing, so-
old kindred spirits, but a lot of kindred spirits.
it's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you.
Wally Landrum, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, several time listener, first time caller. This gives us the opportunity to reconnect, Marianne. We were with you and Marcus and Dom and Sarah about 13 years ago.
Oh,
So
my dear, I see you. Oh, my goodness. Oh, thank you for that. Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
so I was appreciating, as one who tries to speak within the church still, you're
Me too.
connecting to the church year with Advent, the possibilities of future, and Epiphany, the hidden, unknown, and yet what is to come, how that may affect the future. So I am linear thinking. So I'm thinking, well, what about Lent Easter? That's where you're going. And where you went, when I'm thinking that, where you went was the trust, even in risk. And you said to risk living even into the unknown, and not be fearful,
Right.
but live into the fullness of life. And I thought, well, if that's not Lent Easter, I don't know what is. And it just opened up, it shattered my my horizons of trying to control what Lent Easter is so often, into opening up that it really is the trust that the worst that can happen opens up new possibilities, and to not lose hope. And so it just, there's hope for me in speaking a new word with that. But thanks. You didn't mean to go there, I don't think, but because I was listening for it, I heard it.
No, you're absolutely right. And and this is where if we look again at the liturgical seasons, because I actually think there's real wisdom in them. Okay. But I love what you said about Lent. Lent is the ultimate risk. You know, Jesus had a dream. Jesus was doing things. It wasn't going down well with the authorities. It's like in going to Jerusalem, he took the ultimate risk. And actually for the witnesses at the time, he was executed. So here's a case where, you know what, it didn't turn out the way that we wanted.
And it wasn't because he didn't love life, an abundant life, or he went on a suicide mission. I mean, he loved life. It was because he loved life. So
And he
took the
believed in the
risk.
dream. It's
He
like,
took the risk.
you know, I may not, this is Martin Luther King, I may not get there with you, but I see it. And he put everything, he put his life on the line for that, because it was worth it. And he was executed. So how do we talk about that? You know, and then for us to say, well, he died for our sins. Oh my gosh. You know, we can do better than that in terms of a narrative. And I think Christianity has more to say than that. coming up with Jesus died for our sins, and that's why all that happened, talking about an easy way out, that doesn't address anything except make us sinners, that, you know, and all this. I mean, it's all turned in on itself. In my opinion, I'm getting a little bit, but I think you get what I'm saying, Wally. And
Preach
so,
on, sister.
so the Lenten journey, I think, is a perfect example of going into the unknown and risking it all. And then Easter, then what is resurrection? If we think it's the resuscitation of a corpse, it's like, well, it never happened. That is ridiculous. It certainly happened. And that's why it's so important and so powerful that Jesus was executed for his dream. You know, so we have to I think we have to reimagine what the hell is Easter or Pentecost for that reason, or that wonderful long season of ordinary time. Who says it's ordinary, you know? But so you're right. I'm right with you, and you're right with me in terms of returning to Christianity and saying, you know what, let's take another look at it and let's reinterpret it because it needs it. And it deserves it. So, but anyway,
Thank you.
I didn't mean to step on what you were saying too harshly, but I hope I.
You didn't step on it.
Okay.
You gave it life. So
Well, thank you, Molly, and how wonderful to see you again. And you know, we've made it thus far.
yes, we have.
Beloved Marcus didn't make this entire, you know, his journey is done, but we made it. It's wonderful to see you, and wonderful memories of pilgrimage. So glad we did that. Thank you.
Sheila.
Good morning. It's good to see everybody. I pick up so many ideas of
Good.
things people say, you know, to share with others. Especially that died for your sins. Do you know what I've started doing when someone says that? So what does that mean?
Right.
And so far, I haven't found anybody who has a real answer. But at any rate, that isn't what I wanted to say.
Right.
I appreciate also the remark. I also envision God as energy. I wanted to talk a minute about what you were saying about tension.
Ah,
We are living in the tension. Tension must never be confused with chaos.
agreed.
Tension is a good thing. Your sewing machine will not work unless the tension is properly set. It has to have tension in order to function properly. And I thought, wow, there's a sermon title, Functioning Properly. You know, you have to have tension. If you listen to Beethoven, anybody, a modern song, when you get to the bridge, or when you get to, you hear the music build into this huge tension.
Right.
It's there, and then it resolves.
I-
You know, and that's what makes it wonderful. So I like that idea. I want people to not think that it's a negative to
Right.
live in the tension. I believe that every pastor, every preacher has a theme, and mine doesn't relate to this particular day, but I have a friend whose entire ministry, her theme was to live in the mystery.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she would sign everything with a great huge line after her name, you know, that kind of went off into nowhere. But I wanted to address that tension is a good thing,
Yeah,
and
I
we must learn to live in it.
love it. And I think we're built to live in it.
That was interesting. Yes, when you pointed
We're
that
built
out.
for it. You know, we, you know, I think it's a given tension and a necessity, as you put it so beautifully with the analogy of the sewing machine. But I think we're built to live in it. We're built for tension. And I think we need to develop that practice, if you will, you know, because I'm with you. It's not a negative, but we tend to suggest that it is. Anyway, thank you, Sheila. And Sheila, I'm going to be referring to you. Thanks to you, I'm going to be our closing music. I'm going to give you credit for it. You'll hear it when it comes.
Thank you.
Yes, so Sheila is the one who inspired me to choose the closing music. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. So thank you.
Mary Ann, remind me how much time we have.
We've got about another 7 minutes.
Oh, good. I just wanted to add a comment. This conversation, this last one, really reminded me of Parker Palmer's tragic gap where he talks about the gap that it's never resolved. It's what we have to learn how to live into it. That on one side, we know what could be because some of it we've experienced it. And the other part is what really, what life is like and the difficulty of it. And it's that tension that we learn to live in. And it's never resolved. It's a condition of being human.
Yeah, I think that's right. This is the condition of being human. And I would say the difficulty, I mean, I'm going to take a risk here in saying this, but I will say that the difficulty is not a tragedy.
No.
It is simply part of the reality of life. And there are tragedies, don't get me wrong. Okay, I don't want to just, but I think tragedy is, that needs additional description. What happened in Turkey, it's tragic, but it was nobody's fault.
Yeah. Sandra.
Okay, hi there. It's like amazing how everything is built. And so I'm just going to kind of throw out a few little things that have kind of connected. One of them is I'm very much in alignment with Jim High's thing of the life force energy of the universe. It's like thinking about God as energy and everywhere present. And in and through all things is just key for me. And then I got struck when you were talking about neutrinos, because I thought, okay, here we are with our viewing things from the science perspective. And what if we were to, and they're this positive life energy, what if we were thinking of God as the neutrinos everywhere present? So it's,
I'd say that God is the preference for matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever the
exactly.
neutrino, whatever got the neutrino to do that, we
Yeah.
would say thanks be to God.
Exactly. And then when people were talking about, well, how do we do this and how do we be a part of it? When we recognize that God's everywhere present and we're a part of that energy, I think what is so key is that we move into what Jesus was teaching in terms of how we are to be in the world. And to recognize that those energies, that when I move into this consciousness of being love, coming from love, bringing love into whatever situation I am, to recognize that those have the highest energy. They have that, and so to recognize that, for instance, this group, we're all connected, we're all working with these ideas. And so those energies are everywhere present. So we're contributing to those energies everywhere. And so to recognize how important it is every time we make a decision, that instead of going down the suey hole of, oh my gosh, isn't it awful, of going, wait a minute, what are we called to do when we move into having the intention to have the faith that Jesus had? And to move into the consciousness that the mystics have for us, and to be a part of that, and to choose that even in the midst of this, I put my highest energy.
Right.
And I went back to when I was in graduate school. The instructor I had was really good friends with an environmentalist named Theodore Roszak. And he came and spent a day with us, and he had just finished a book, and I don't even remember which one, where he was really talking about a lot of the possibilities that were there with environmental challenges. And he was getting a lot of people criticizing him for putting so much of that possible stuff in his book. And his comment to us is something that has stuck with me forever, because he says, I want you all to know that if there's a 99.5% chance we're going to blow ourselves all to hell, I don't know, that was his exact words. He said, you better believe that 100% of Theodore Roszak is with that 0.5%.
Exactly. Right.
And I think that's the consciousness in a way that we need to hold,
Right.
in terms of doing the spiritual work that we're all doing daily that's so important.
I agree with you, and sort of to have the courage of the trust and confidence. with that 90, the 90% that I'm with that 1% that's hopeful. The last bit of music that we play in our 15-minute music lead up to our thing is called Autumn Song. And it's purportedly what was playing when the Titanic went down. Okay, there's a reason I picked that. There's a reason I picked all that music. But if we're going to go down, I want to be in that quartet.
Hmm.
Okay, so even if the result isn't what we want, it's worthy of I want to be part of that quartet if we go down, and I hope we don't. Okay, but I think that maybe that's a little bit what Ted Rozak was saying, that it's like, if we don't make it, but I'm going to be with those people who said, I have a dream.
But at the same time, I think it's so important for us to realize that there's so much more power in the alignment with that positive than there is with all of the appearance of negativity.
Right. Because it keeps open possibility. And I do not want to switch one wishful thinking for another. Okay. Like, but I think that there's some power and truth in what you're talking about. And so, and it's worthy, this life is worthy of our hopefulness. The future is worthy of our hope, because we are. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks, Sandra. And we should probably move along pretty quickly because I have a very brief close, but I'll need a minute or two for that. So let's see what we can do here.
Ken, you unmute yourself, but I just want to encourage, there's quite a few more people with their hands up that we're not going to get time to hear from. But if you could maybe put your thoughts or your basic reflection or question in the chat, Marianne will be able to see that. Ken.
Well, I'll be very brief. You introduced the notion of risk versus security. Jim High mentioned Wright brothers to Neil Armstrong. Those are people who knew what risk was about. Right. What kind of risk at street level does the church need to deal with in the 21st century? And we can enjoy philosophizing a lot right here, but what are we willing to the risk? Like the Wright brothers and Neil Armstrong felt risk. They had to trust people that put a spaceship together and all of that. Who does the church trust? What does it look like? And what does it look like as far as what the church is willing to risk, as Paul did, as Jesus did, etc.
Yeah. And for what?
Yes.
And it's Marcus's question. What is the heart of Christianity? What are we willing to risk? Because if we're really willing to risk Christianity, it's possible that it won't come through. I mean, it's possible, but what are we willing to risk? But anyway, I love your question. Thank you, Ken. Nice to see you.
One more?
Yeah.
Jennifer, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm so moved by everyone's contributions. Two things that are missing for me here that haven't been said yet, and maybe I missed the last couple, so maybe they got said then. But man, I would love to throw out sin.
I'm with you.
So
yeah.
So
original sin.
So I think that there, and I would love to, and the other thing that's missing is this love thing, that they will know we are Christians by our love. Yeah. It's like, man, if there's anything for Christianity to contribute in the 21st century, it's that radical, crazy love thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that our challenge is to see people as God sees them and love as God loves them. And then the one last thing is Christianity as deconstruction.
Yes.
It's like Christ is the turner over of the money changers' tables in the temple.
Yes.
And it's part of Christ's saying, to begin again. That's the whole thing of resurrection for me, is to begin again. So even with our ideas, even with the idols of the ideas, you know, what idols can we destroy? How can we begin again?
I love it. And I think deconstruction I also think that's what it's about. And that's a positive thing. It's like opening petal by petal by petal. It's opening. And yes. Jack also said that deconstruction for him is a practice in meditation, which I think is really fascinating. It's a meditative art. Anyway. Oh goodness, I know that there are some people who've just been waiting. How do we do this?
Is there somebody in particular that you would like to call on, Marianne?
No, I can't. I can't say that. Let's see. Are some of you folks able to stay for coffee hour? Can you stay for coffee hour? You folks, okay. And Katie, is that you? Can you stay for coffee hour? Okay. And is there somebody who can't? Let me just do that. Because if you can all stay for coffee hour, then we'll just bring you over into coffee time and continue this conversation if you're comfortable with that. Is that okay?
Great.
Great. Okay. Lovely. Because we're coming right up to 11 o'clock. Okay. Thank you so much. I am so appreciative of your contributions to this. And this is, needless to say, this is conversation we will continue. But it's so helpful for me. I'm just so glad that I have people that I can put this stuff out to, and that we can dance together with all of this. I love it. Our next second Saturday is March 11th. And Brandon Scott is going to be a guest. Brandon Scott is a master of parable. He's written a book about the trouble with resurrection. He knows a lot about Paul. He knows a lot about early Christianity. So I am really interested to hear what Brandon thinks and what he thinks about Christianity and Christianity in and for the 21st century. He's also a photographer, a really good one, and he is also a bird watcher. And he sparred with Cassius Clay in the boxing ring before Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali. Isn't that just a wonderful little, and I think that he's been sparring ever since myself. But anyway, Brandon is a wonderful guy. He's part of the West Star, which is also part of the Jesus Seminar folks. So he's been exposed to all kinds of things, raised Catholic, but he's really been part of the vastly changing terrain of Christianity. And he was a colleague of Mark's. He knew Mark. So closing music, Sheila, I'm thanking you for the closing music that I am picking for today. It is from Simon and Garfunkel. Actually, it's Paul Simon is singing this, Slip Sliding Away. So that will be our closing music for today. And the reason that I picked it, Sheila referred to this when we were in our small group gathering last month, and talked about slip sliding away, that the older that we all get, we're all sort of slip sliding away. But there's another dimension to slip sliding away that is part of this Paul Simon song, which is that people tend to retreat from their passions when they're confronted with the difficulties or vagaries of the world. Okay, I mean, there's the song you'll hear. It's about a guy who's so deeply in love that he's afraid he's going to lose his identity. Okay, a woman who's so depressed that she is sort of hopeless. A father who goes to his son because he wants to explain himself to his son and then realizes he can't. Okay, so this slip sliding away, it's like if we don't live deliberately, we might find that we're just slip sliding away. So my encouragement for all of us is, let us not just slip slide away. Let's live deliberately and work hard towards the dream that one day. Okay. I look forward to seeing you next second Saturday, March 11th with Brandon Scott, and I will see others of you in in just 5 minutes' time, and we will have some time at coffee time. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your generosity and your presence today. Thank you.